Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm just doing fine, but the country is still having a problem, and yet it looks like it's coming to an end because the Congress has acted.
Yes.
The Fed's been acting, and they've been printing like crazy. Excuse me.
Yeah, it looks like they reached an agreement on the bailout bill, and I think it was Kudlow who said it's going to be $6 trillion, which doesn't seem like too much money, does it, to save the economy?
No, that's a small amount.
But he also said, and after President Trump said he'd like to start the country back to business by Easter, he came out and grabbed the microphone and said, no, it's going to be weeks and months, but probably not years before we start up again. So that is that's unfortunately par for the course sometimes with the president. His people.
Well, there's a conspiracy. Somebody stole my voice.
It is. They're gonna say that you've got the virus now, and in fact, it's just our bad air in the studio. But it is another example, unfortunately, of people taking the lead and telling what the president meant to say is something very different from what he actually did say, and it's a real problem. So what we're talking about today is the profiteers. And we think profiteers, people that buy a bunch of toilet paper and then they'll sell it for twice or three times as much. And there is a lot of that going on. And people do profit from panic in their pocketbooks. But there are a lot of other kinds of profiteers that come when a panic like this happens, And in fact, we put up a piece on our website from John Whitehead, a good friend of ours from the Rutherford Institute, that talks about all the real big profiteers who are making a lot, not just money, but they're making something they love even more, which is power off of the crisis.
There's always some money involved.
Yeah, there is always money involved, and there's always profit involved. So, but what Whitehead talks about is the emergency state, which has emerged in the crisis, and he makes a great point that they're unraveling the constitutional fabric of the nation, but they're also rendering the citizenry fully dependent on the government for financial handouts, medical intervention, protection, and even sustenance. And we've never, even after 9/11, we didn't see everything. The citizenry saying, we're going to give you everything. Just take what you want. Please just take care of us. It's pretty chilling.
The Republicans offered a pretty sum of money, which was too much. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they offered, I think it was $1.7 trillion that they were going to use. And then Nancy Pelosi said, no, that's not enough. We're going to go ahead and put it up to $2.5 trillion. And that might do something. And then Mnuchin came by and Kudlow came by and said, no, it's going to be more like $6 trillion. And sooner or later, that's going to start adding up to some real money, Dr. Paul. And you talk about what that's going to have. What about the inflationary pressures? What's that going to do to people on fixed incomes, people who are struggling already to survive if all of a sudden prices double or something of this nature? It's going to unleash a real crisis and a lot of real deaths in America.
Well, they, I don't think I'm going to get my voice back for some reason, so I'm sorry.
Well, we did want to talk about the profiteers, and we want to talk a little bit about this huge bailout. It looks like the House is going to vote on it tomorrow. The Senate says they've reached agreement. Well, what does it mean to give trillions and trillions of dollars to people? Well, it ends up in the hands of the well-connected. It doesn't do much for the economy. In fact, we have a great tweet up from Professor Per Byland, who's associated with the Mises Institute, and this really captures the whole thing. Everyone's celebrating in this picture underneath. The Senate and White House reached $2 trillion stimulus deal to blunt coronavirus fallout. And here's what Professor Byland says, Capitol Hill, hey, we made loads of money. And then Professor says, if this is truly a free lunch, a political handout to society, the obvious and necessary question is to ask, why don't they do this all the time? Why don't we always get free stuff? What's stopping you? If handing out trillions of dollars is the answer, then why don't they send us a check for $1 million each? Then we'll all be rich.
Well, you shouldn't suggest it because they'll probably do it.
Yeah, that may be next. Absolutely. When you think about other coronavirus profiteers, and think about just here in Texas, Dr. Paul, this is incredible. Lena Hidalgo, She is a 29-year-old lawyer who happens to be the county judge for Harris County. 29-year-old attorney from Harris County. She beat the Republican incumbent on the promise of more accountability for government. Well, yesterday she got in front of the microphone, 29-year-old lawyer. She ordered the shutdown of the fourth largest city in the country. She ordered the shutdown of Houston. How does she get that kind of power? How does one person like this have the ability to tell all businesses in the fourth largest country in the nation, that's it, we're switching you off. We're switching the economy off. You know, it's astonishing, Dr. Paul, and she's not the only one. And unfortunately, our governor, Greg Abbott, he's getting weaker and weaker. He initially, of course, he exempted churches and funeral homes from his stay-at-home order, but he's proven a bit spineless in the face of the county power grabs. Here's something that he said, which is a little bit chilling. It's clear to me we may not be achieving the level of compliance that is needed. And he threatened to issue even more stern warnings to Texans about staying at home, don't go to work. You can go to the store, but maybe you can't even go to the store because a lot of people are clamoring for shelter in place. And Dr. Paul, even here in Brazoria County, I noticed a few comments on their Facebook page. Why haven't you ordered stay at home or shelter in place? Shelter in place means you can't even go to the store to buy things, and people are wondering that and just begging to be told by government guns, don't you dare even go out of your house. And it's just terrifying to see this happening. The county's ordering these things with no accountability, with no ability to, in many cases, just proclamations. Fort Bend and other counties put up an order, in fact, that you can't even go to church. And I think we have a JPEG on that that's pretty amazing. Religious and worship services may only be provided by video and teleconference. Religious institutions must limit in-person staff to 10 people or less when preparing. They must follow social distancing of at least 6 feet and other measures. Well, what does that do to the First Amendment, which I don't see anything in the Constitution that says it's suspended in the time of a flu. But yet, for a lot of churches, mine included, you simply don't fulfill your Sunday duty by watching it on television. You have to physically be there. So why aren't we allowed to make that choice of how we decide to worship?
But when there is an emergency, you suspend the Constitution. You don't want that to get in the way. But you know, the longer this goes on, the more I think about the combination of the medical problems that we face as well as the financial. And I've come to the conclusion, as others have hinted, that the virus exists. The virus can be serious, but there's probably millions of people who have had the virus that you'll never know who they are, that never got sick, or if they did, it lasted for a day and that was it. Then why the big deal going on? Because a lot of people have worked hard to benefit from this. And I believe very sincerely it's a combination. You know, doctors like Dr. Sardi and others have indicated that there's pretty good evidence for this. In the combination, everybody knows that if you happen to have the virus and you're elderly and having problems, you're diabetic, you're more likely to get very, very sick. And they put down all these deaths as a consequence, of the coronavirus. At the same time, they're probably dying from emphysema or pneumonia or from smoking too much, or who knows what things have gone on. But so it does affect the elderly. It certainly affects people who have other diseases and their immune systems are down. But I think there's been the lack of emphasis and understanding of immune systems. You know, why would it be that all of a sudden a young person has a different immune system than the elderly? And the immune system is a consequence very often of poor nutrition, not exercise, not getting the vitamins, not getting vitamin D, not getting vitamin C. And yes, but there seems to be an incentive and a benefit by saying that, it's the coronavirus and we want more money.
Yeah.
And here we are We are already in a year where we've had $1 trillion deficit already, going to be record high. So what do? Like you say, they said, well, what we need is $2 trillion more. Of course, the Republicans were conservative. They offered less than $2 trillion. So the Democrats says $2.5 trillion. So they finally compromised and gave a lot to the Green Deal and all the radical left, and the money's going in there. And it's almost insane. How do they do this? But the one thing that holds it together is people still would use dollars. The world still uses dollars, but that will end. And they don't ever talk about how did we get into this crisis. Well, it was a coronavirus, but what if that's been rigged a little bit? What if that's been boosted up to be much more serious than it really was? But what about the downturn? The downturn, they pay all this attention maybe to something totally false. Maybe this coronavirus thing is like a false flag or something, and you get people so excited and intense, and you have the mob psychology. But if you look at that, you say, wow, why don't they talk about the market? Oh, yeah, we're worried about the market collapse. That's why we're bailing out the corporations and the bank. We've already done $10 trillion of that. So they go on, but they never seriously ask the question, how did the financial condition get so bad that a virus can come along and destroy the whole system? And that's why they're missing the point. And I've mentioned this before. I described this as when we were looking good a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're sitting there with a building that looks great, but the foundation has been totally eroded by the termites of debt, and all they're doing. Too much debt and too much low interest rates. So what have we done? We have really spent some money, huge sums of money, and we've taken the interest rates down. And then more confusion about the treatment. When you made the points about how our civil liberties are being destroyed and they're locking up people, they have no authority to do this. So it is the herd mentality, but the herd has turned into a mob mentality, and people are almost at the point that they're demanding, martial law. For the noisy people, the people in charge, the politicians and all. I still think there's some people waking up now and they're sick and tired of this, but it's just such a shame. I think the First Amendment has really been destroyed.
Yeah.
Because, if you say the wrong things, if you say, well, let's have a rally for freedom in the park next week, let's come out and say, we're not afraid of the coronavirus. The leaders at least would go to prison instantaneously. You'd be arrested. So you can't even speak. You can't even do it on the internet.
Yeah.
They say, well, you're exposing people to danger if you do it in the park. They say, well, do it on the internet. But look, you've been
censorship.
You've been censored. I've had a little bit of that too,
Yeah.
and a lot of good people. And just think of if you want to know what's going on, what happens to people like Edward Snowden and other people who are blowing the whistle and trying to tell the people the truth about what's going in this country. And I think what we're witnessing here is something that is crucial, that people fully understand on exactly what's going on.
In places like Fort Bend County and others here in Texas and across the nation, but certainly in those counties, I read the proclamation, if you dare go to work, you face 6 months in jail. If you dare go to church, you feel compelled, 6 months in jail. And that is going to dissuade a lot of average folks who the thought of that is just terrifying, But the thing is, they're going to lose their jobs permanently. But the government tries to throw them a sop. Hey, we're going to give you $3,000 in free money. And a lot of people say, hey, that sounds good. How far is that $3,000 going to go if you've just lost your job completely? That's the real danger. Mm-hmm. So,
even Pompeo hasn't gotten out of the news yet. He's still very much involved, and he's for appropriations and all. But he's back in the news because he claims he's a humanitarian and wants to help Iran. Yeah. And just think of what's going on there. So the crisis building up and all this excitement, the interventionist foreign policy is sort of hidden in the sense that people aren't talking much about it, but those things continue, like the war games continue, the war spending will get increased, it's not going to die down. So the only thing that is resisting what is coming and will come is the fact that there is still excessive trust in the American government to pull it off, and print the money. We did it in World War II and we did it in 2010. But the world keeps changing, and there's reasons for us to think that our policies in economics and monetary policy and social policies, and even the defense of liberty, we have weakened ourselves. So that's why I think people should be quite concerned, because it isn't hard to understand how we got here. And if that is the case, it should not be difficult to describe exactly what we have to do. The big problem is there's a little bit of pain and suffering when you correct it, and you can't deny that. They've done this for years. You know, you made good fun of the people saying, well, we've given you all of this money. Why didn't you do it before? They really were.
Yeah.
And now they're going to double it and triple it, but that's coming to an end.
Yeah, that is. And, you know, you mentioned Pompeo, and that is a good point, because if we're talking about profiteers from this crisis, you know, as we said yesterday, Iran is on its back from this coronavirus. It's had a lot of problems. It's overwhelmed because it can't get medicine thanks to the sanctions. But here Pompeo goes out yesterday, the great humanitarian of our time. He pulls out his list. These are the 10 ways that Iran is spreading coronavirus. You know, it's using this coronavirus and spreading it around, which is something completely preposterous. You know, he's got to go down as really one of the most shameless individuals. I mean, I thought Bolton was bad. Bolton is starting to look good next to Pompeo and what he's using this for. You know, there's no question about that. It's really, really, really bad. But you mentioned we're talking about profiteers. By the way, we should mention this is the height of allergy season down here in South Texas, so we're both dealing with a lot of pollen in the air. But Anthony Fauci is one, I think, that deserves the credit for being a profiteer. He's getting his 15 minutes of fame. He's basically, he did an interview the other day where he said, yeah, the president says something and we have to correct him afterwards. You know, he's so much better. But he's the one who said that the coronavirus is 10 times more deadly than the flu. Of course, you were zinged for that by saying, what is he talking about? Well, more and more it's coming out. And in fact, thanks to our good friend Bob Wenzel, who's been dogged about this, he's putting up a lot of great stuff on his site. But he cited an Oxford study, and it was in the New York Magazine. The headline was pretty scary. Oxford study, coronavirus may have already infected half of the UK population. But the interesting thing is when you go to the actual quote and you read what they actually discovered, it makes it sound a lot less frightening, because what they found is that if half the population actually has it, as their models are showing, the death rate, the rate of even getting ill, is so far lower than the expectations that originally put out by the World Health Organization, which, by the way, has a history of exaggerating these kinds of things for its own benefit. But here's what the most important paragraph in the piece said. According to a team from Oxford University's Evolutionary Ecology of Infectious Disease lab, half the population of the United Kingdom may already have been infected with the coronavirus. If this modeling is confirmed in follow-up studies, that would mean that fewer than 0.01% of those infected require hospital treatment, with the majority showing very minor symptoms or none at all. So that's not 0.01 dead. That's 0.01 even needing to go to the hospital. Yeah. And we're seeing more and more of that, and we don't have time to talk about it, but Wenzel has another great piece that 2 Stanford doctors wrote in the Wall Street Journal. These are mainstream publications. I think it was yesterday. Find it on Target Liberty. They are coming to the same conclusions. They're mismeasuring this to make it look artificially more deadly. And you talk about false flags and things profiting. You got to wonder why. Who's benefiting from mismeasuring this to scare the hell out of everyone?
I have a hard time believing they're just casual mistakes. Some of them are bureaucratic. They work for the government, and they're not as good as scientists that some people give them credit for. But they do work the statistics, and the large majority in this country, maybe 70%, they really don't trust the government to tell us the truth. The stats on economic policies are misleading to us. How often have we been lied into war? And right now, I think if anything, this might end up going down in history as one of the biggest fake news stories ever, if this is true, what these statistics are pointing out. So this is this is a major thing. I don't think anybody's going to prove one thing or another, because people, are so locked in, especially the ones like you mentioned, a few of them that love this authority, even if they're local authorities. That they get the opportunity to do this. And I think if they can rig the stats in economic policies on how much inflation there is and these other things, there's no reason in the world, if this is a benefit, which is something you've been talking about, if it's a benefit to a certain group, or the military budget, or the spending, or the green team, that means the rigging is deliberate and it works. And but you got to give everybody something. And what you were saying earlier is, some people think, "But we should have had it sooner," but they want it forever and ever. And there's nothing that can dispel the truism. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. All that is to be discussed are who are the victims and who are the beneficiaries. And right now it's being sorted out, because it looks like 90% of the American people are going to be victims of loss of liberty, just as the Patriot Act was all about. The American people got punished for that, and still being punished. We still can't even ease up a little bit on the Patriot Act, spying on everybody. And this is just going to add to it unless we change the attitude. But I sincerely believe the opportunity is before us, because the people will get disgusted, but they feel entrapped. I mean, we even think, what can we say here? What can we say there? How are they going to close us down completely? So I think that there's more support for us. Just like now the support is coming out that Fauci might not be a genius, and I think that the handwriting might be on the wall for him. How Trump works, once there's a great guy, and then there's a little bit of problem we have and a little criticism, and then the next day there's a little, we're okay, but we'll see what happens this next week, because it's unfortunate, but I don't think Fauci has helped our president. I don't think he's helped our country, and I don't think he's an expert. I think the people who are suggesting the evidence now that shows it's just not the coronavirus, this is it, and it kills this number of people, and we can predict it. It looks bad, so we have to have martial law. I don't believe that for a minute. But I do believe that the virus can compound problems that already exist and contribute to the death of people. And a lot of people know this already. Some people suggested, maybe we don't have to have this total control of people. Maybe people that happen to be elderly and have a disease, that we should be more cautious with them. But generally that's been the case. Common sense has frequently protected people like this, that whose immune system is down because of cancer or something else. They use common sense. And I think right now we need a good dose of common sense to help us sort all this out.
And the thing is, people will help others without the government demanding it. And my parents are elderly. They live in California. They had two neighbors they didn't even really know, left a little note at the door, hey, if you guys need anything, just let us know. Well, they didn't have a government order to do that. They just did. And you talk about fake news. And this is how propaganda works. You take something with some truth in it. Yes, there is a virus. It can be very deadly. People that are vulnerable should be careful. But you take that reality, that truth, and you blow up all the propaganda around it. And that's the real danger, I think. But I would just close with two things, Dr. Paul. First of all, Brazoria County, if you're listening, don't follow the others, because we're going to work hard to defeat anyone who puts us under lockdown next election. I'm not political, but I tell you what, I will do that as much as I can. And the final thing is, Dr. Paul did say, there's a lot of pressure to go along. There's been a lot of pressure for 40 years for Dr. Paul to go along, to get along, and he's never done it. He's always questioned what they say is the truth, and he's been proven right, pretty much every time that I know. Talk about the Iraq War, et cetera, Patriot Act. So, but there is a danger. Go along to get along. Just shut up. Just do what you're told. Well, this is not what our channel is all about, and there may be consequences for that. We're not pushing crazy conspiracies. We're simply questioning the shibboleths that they're throwing out. But there are possible consequences, and that's why we do ask you, and I have a link in the description here. If you're watching this show, please subscribe to our channel and sign up for notifications, but also go to the Ron Paul Institute website, ronpaulinstitute.org, and subscribe so we can all keep in touch and keep the information flowing regardless of how they try to strangle the information.
Very good, Daniel. And I don't believe this has anything to do with fake news, because my staff tells me that our numbers of subscribers to this channel is going up, and that's good. That's good news. It's encouraging. We need that. So if you can help us in that light, numbers do make a difference, especially if they're honest numbers. I mean, we can't say we have 5 million people, but I also know that quality is important, and that's what we work for. People who are sincere in thinking out and trying to seek the truth, admit when somebody's going in the wrong direction, and try to work it into a philosophy of liberty, where people have a right to their life and their liberty and the pursuit of their happiness, and that we don't have to have a bureaucratic government telling us how to live. And, you know, I used to talk so much in the campaigns that I'd like to be a president, and I've been in office, but I'm having a little trouble because I don't want to run your life. I don't want to tell you how to spend your money, and I don't want to send our country to war unless it's an emergency, a declared war and whatnot. So it's in a way a negative. Government shouldn't want to do that, and people shouldn't say, do it, do it, do it. But then the tragedy is everybody becomes dependent. How do you get out of a government medical system? How do you get out of a government monetary system? And so it's a very big problem. But ultimately, this one's going to crash, and we have to offer to the people a system of government which is very pro-American, pro-liberty, and pro-peace and prosperity. Thank you for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.